Well, thank you for joining us today. My name is Andrew Brack, and I'm a Program Manager at the Proactive Health Office at ARPA-H. We're here today to talk about the PROSPR program, which stands for Proactive Solutions for Preserving Resilience. Before starting, I'd really like to apologise for those inconvenienced by the late cancellation of the hybrid event. We made this decision to switch to a virtual and streamlined event so that we could get the necessary information to you as fast as possible to minimise any delay to deadlines and to starting the program. While it's me here talking about PROSPR today, it does take a team, it takes a village. And so I'd first of all like to start and thank Drs. Naima Pushafi and Kelly Anderson for building the PROSPR program with me. So you're going to hear about the program today, but you're also going to hear about other people from the ARPA sphere. We're going to hear first from Dr. Wade Shen, who is the Office Director of Proactive Health. Later on after me, you'll hear from Tracy Newsom from the Business Innovation Division to talk about legal agreements working with ARPA. And then finally, last but not least, from the PATIO office, who deals with all things commercialization opportunities, you'll hear from Craig Gravitz. So why are we here today? Well, hopefully like me, you want to be a part of bringing innovative solutions to extend health span by 20 years for all Americans. So right now, when people begin to feel some fatigue or loss of their original abilities, say in their 40s or 50s, the doctor will tell them this is normal, they have no real options, and those people will get progressively less able until picking up one of or multiple chronic diseases. We imagine a future where people are tracking their health, and the doctors have medicines that can be prescribed when their health first begins to decline, and that gives those people an extra 20 years in good health. We would like to see the majority of 60-year-olds feeling just as healthy as they did when they were 40. Not only will this save lives from the many chronic diseases that occur when people age, but it gives people optionality. People that now are healthy enough to stay in the workplace should they want to. They're able to travel, to see their loved ones, lift a suitcase above their head, play with their grandkids. That's the vision of a world after PROSPR. So next, let me introduce Dr. Wade Shen, Director of the Proactive Health Office.
Before we dig into the details of this particular program, I thought it would be useful for you to understand the context of ARPA-H, this agency, ARPA-H, and how it operates. The mission of ARPA-H as an agency is to demonstrate and accelerate new capabilities that could improve healthcare outcomes for everyone. To do that, we run short-term research and development programs that focus on developing new capabilities and demonstrating that it's possible to make use of these capabilities in real-world settings. Programs begin by harvesting nascent opportunities that are emerging from early research and innovation, and they solve for a number of real-world implementation problems and scaling issues that then make it possible to develop a prototype that's deployable into the real world. And through the deployment and evaluation of those deployments, programs are then able to create the evidence that drives adoption of new capabilities and their implementations into the healthcare system. Programs like this start from the early design phase, where we try to identify at ARPA-H core opportunities that are emerging from basic research that could potentially solve hard but well-defined problems in healthcare. We try to identify key technical challenges that need to be solved for during the course of a program, and then design an execution plan that allows for us to manage the technical and research risks associated with the hard problems that we try to solve during the course of these programs. We then work with the community to assemble a team of performers like you through these Proposers Day events that bring together the best of both industry and academic partners to build coalitions and teams that can then work on our programs over the course of the next 3 to 5 years to then execute our view of the work that needs to be done. Now, often the work during a program will change as we learn new things, as we discover that it's potentially possible to solve certain problems in a particular way, but maybe not exactly the way that we started off with during the course of our original program design. And we adapt. We often will accelerate work that seems to be promising during the course of a program, or cancel work that seems to be not as promising as we had originally hoped at the beginning of the program. Once programs reach a point of being able to demonstrate meaningful, viable capability in the world, we then will often work with performers, teams like you, to accelerate and transition and commercialize these efforts into downstream investment and or productization. The work of ARPA-H is divided up into 4 core mission offices, each with a different focus area in the healthcare system, and an office called PATIO that is designed to take programs from the other mission offices and accelerate their transition into the real world through upfront support in the design process of programs and downstream support at the end of programs when technical results need to be facilitated and transferred to a wider community for adoption. The mission offices have different focus areas. The first of our mission offices, the Health Science Futures Office, develops very early capabilities through early research by expanding what's possible and by accelerating early research outcomes into very nascent demonstrations of new capabilities. The Scalable Solutions Office, on the other hand, tries to take later stage work that's happening in the other offices and in other research and accelerate the scalability of these solutions and their deployability into the real world by solving cost and manufacturing related issues that make it possible for solutions to reach a wider audience. Our office, the Proactive Health Office, is focused on new capabilities that prevent people from getting sick in the first place. That could be new capabilities that improve prevention. That could be new capabilities that help us detect and characterize disease and disease risk much earlier. And that can also be new capabilities to help individuals in our society adopt practices that prevent them from getting sick in the first place. And finally, the Resilient Systems Office focuses on building healthcare systems as a whole that are less than brittle, especially in the presence of crises like pandemics and social disruption. My office, the Proactive Health Office, is all about trying to reframe the work that we do in our national healthcare system around proactivity as opposed to reactivity. And the reason we care about this is that a lot of our national investment today, in fact, the vast majority of our national investment today in healthcare and healthcare R&D is spent on how to treat patients and how to do that better. And that's a worthy cause, but a significant portion of our health problems are actually in the space of preventable disease. So when we look at, for instance, cardiovascular disease that accounts for 1 in 3 deaths in the United States, about 80% of those cases are preventable with early intervention. Similarly, 1 in 3 Americans are at risk of developing diabetes and the complications associated with diabetes, but more than 90% of cases are preventable or controllable with early interventions. And finally, when we look at problems like mental illness, for which 1 in 2 Americans suffer from some form of this during the course of their lifetimes, probably 30 to 40% of those cases are preventable also with early intervention. And finally, even problems like cancer, which we traditionally think of as being something that we treat in medical cases, more than 45% of those cases are preventable or controllable with some kind of early intervention. Now, what that means is that if we were able to put a concerted effort on proactive health, a significant fraction of Americans and people across the world wouldn't necessarily need the healthcare system to solve problems that are entirely preventable in the first place. And the opportunity for us as a nation is to avoid maybe a third of annual deaths per year and potentially add 20 years of lifespan to the lives of Americans in terms of their healthy living. So I mentioned that the Proactive Health Office has a core mission to prevent, detect, and mitigate the effects of disease and aging. Well, to do that, we think that we need to develop a national capability to prevent people from becoming patients. And that fundamentally for us involves creating new ways to prevent, detect, and mitigate disease, facilitating the adoption of proactive care and prevention. And finally, we think it's going to be necessary to revolutionize the systems that could potentially enable access to and facilitate prevention and early detection within our society. Now, we think there are really a large number of core opportunities that could help us enable these objectives. These come in the form of bioengineering advances. They come in the form of better understanding of the biology of disease progression and better capability in AI and statistics for us to longitudinally and predictively model disease. And finally, we know that there are emerging capabilities in social science and the science of individual behaviors that could potentially be harvested to help us create new facilities for adoption of proactive care and could help us to create new systems by which we could facilitate the use of that care. Programs within PHO make use of these core innovation opportunities in order to be able to demonstrate and develop new capabilities in prevention, in early detection, and in the delay and mitigation of disease. Now, often it takes multiple different kinds of opportunities and multiple different areas of research for programs to be successful. In other words, our programs are often multidisciplinary in nature. So when we think about programs like PROSPR that are in our current program set that you can see publicly online, these programs make use of capabilities like longitudinal data modeling and AI capabilities that are emerging to be able to make predictions about diseases, to be able to do things like potentially diagnose disease earlier or predict the outcomes associated with aging and aging-related prevention and wellness interventions. They also make use of underlying understanding of system biology and potentially advances that are emerging from biochemical engineering. And when we look at across all of our potential portfolio of programs, many of these programs are not just multidisciplinary in nature, but potentially end up solving a wide range of problems in order to demonstrate new capabilities that could transform proactivity in our healthcare system. Now, I'm not going to brief the details of some of our potential work, but what you're seeing here in blue are potential new areas in which we might develop programs in PHO. So keep your eyes peeled as to new opportunities that may be emerging from this particular office. For the purpose of the rest of the brief, though, know that your advances, the work that you are engaged in, represent core opportunities for this program to succeed and for future programs within PHO to be able to succeed too. So hopefully you'll be able to participate within this particular program as it moves forward. But even if you aren't able to do so, there will be new and interesting opportunities, we suspect, for some of the work that you're doing to become part of the ARPA-H family of research and outcomes. So join us in those opportunities as they come down the pike. Thanks again, and I'll turn it back over to the program manager to give you more details as to how this program will operate.
Well, thank you very much, Wade. So let's talk about the PROSPER program. Like every ARPA program, PROSPER starts with the what if question. What if we had therapeutics to extend health span and prevent the onset of multiple chronic diseases by targeting the aging biology directly? So as I mentioned earlier, when we hit approximately the age of 40, we begin to lose function and general health. These optimal years we refer to as health span. The decline in health that occurs subsequently correlates with the emergence of multiple chronic diseases. And then we begin to treat each of those individual diseases as it manifests. So we propose that new solutions are needed to target aging biology directly and thus prevent diseases before they're life-threatening or debilitating. PROSPER moves us towards preventative healthcare. So besides the obvious cost of aging to human health, there is a significant cost to the economy. So government-entitled programs are a significant expense, with potential insolvency being reached in 2030. So how can a medicine or intervention that prevented health decline impact government spending? Well, here we've put together just two conservative estimates. Let's imagine that there was a medicine that would halt the decline in health and the increasing costs that occur as a consequence of that health decline in 65 to 85-year-olds with a compliance of 10%, i.e. 10% of those people in that age bracket take the medicine. This will provide approximately $2 billion a year in Medicare savings. Here's another example. If 10% of 60 to 65-year-olds stayed in the workplace because of this medicine, that would give them one extra year of health and prevent those health declines. That would save $27.5 billion a year, both through Social Securities and Medicare savings. And if those people were in the workforce, that would give an additional $80 billion a year to GDP. So the question is, why don't we already have therapeutics that can extend health span? Well, it's simply because the aging process is slow. Therefore, studying, developing those therapeutics takes a long time and it's not financially viable. For example, a typical drug discovery and development program takes approximately 15 years and costs on average about $2 billion. So what would that look like for an aging drug? Well, that would take approximately 45 years to track that age-dependent decline and a minimum of $6 billion. Just by multiplying the 15 years by 3, we get to $6 billion. But of course, we also don't have a defined clinical endpoint that would allow us to assess the drug effectiveness for aging. Therefore, we need short-term surrogate markers of long-term health outcomes that would allow us to shorten clinical trial duration and therefore reduce costs. So how do we do this? How do we do this in 5 years? So this is an ambitious program, and PROSPER will accomplish its goals by developing validated surrogate biomarkers and identification of therapeutics that can extend health span via these 3 interrelated technical areas. So technical area 1, we're going to generate a PROSPER intrinsic capacity score. This addresses the problem that we don't have any FDA-approved short-term surrogates that are highly correlated with long-term health outcomes. Technical area 2, we're going to accelerate the creation of a health span industry. We'll use FDA drug repurposing approach to A, demonstrate surrogates that are intervenable, and B, develop first-generation therapeutics that extend health span. And in technical area 3, we'll use the surrogate biomarkers identified in the other technical areas to test and develop second-generation therapeutics designed specifically to extend health span. And ask, can we now develop drugs using a short-duration clinical trial with the extent of extending health span by 20 years? To achieve these ambitious goals and interrelated goals, all performers are expected to collaborate with each other throughout the life cycle of the whole program. And together, the data that will be generated through PROSPER will build the train tracks for a productive therapeutic industry to develop solutions based on the biology of aging directly. So let's start with technical area 1, predicting a 20-year health outcome. So currently, there are various data sets that can predict 10-year mortality risk. Whether it's epigenetic clocks, frailty index, global longitudinal phenotypes, all of these datasets have their strengths and weaknesses. PROSPER is going to focus on a new concept called intrinsic capacity, as the basis for predicting health span and health trajectories through a person's life. We're using intrinsic capacity due to its predictive power, broad health assessments, and ease of clinical integration. Just to describe intrinsic capacity, this is based on 5 subdomains: cognition, psychology, vitality, sensory, and locomotion. We'll be using intrinsic capacity in these subdomains to quantify an individual's health trajectory as they start from middle age towards and going through an aging process. The goal of PROSPR is to generate a score, an intrinsic capacity score, for 20 years health prediction. Not only will it give us a surrogate biomarker, we believe that intrinsic capacity has face validity that could serve as an endpoint for clinical studies addressing health declines during aging. So here are the key elements of technical area 1. The first step is that performers will begin to generate a version 1 of PROSPR-IC based on currently available data sets. This allows performers to identify the components of the IC score. We will develop kits for in-home assessment of PROSPR-IC. After the kits are built, data collection will occur through a 1-year validation study to test whether the in-home IC measures are similar to the in-clinic PROSPR-IC measured in people across the US. Now, we're collecting data in-home. At ARPA-H, we believe that there'll be a significant amount of healthcare that is conducted in-home in the next 10 years. And we're going to ask performers to develop approaches that will help with the retention and keeping those people in those studies over time. After a 1 year of baseline studies, a subset of participants will perform a 1-year intervention that must include diet, exercise, stress management. We can also include mental health, social engagement, or other lifestyle improvements. The intent of this part of the program is not to determine which intervention is better than another, but rather that will provide the stimulus to change the biomarker signal compared to baseline. And the performers are asked to tell us what they think are the best interventions. And next there are 2 paths. One is the commercialization of the kit, and the second part is discussions with the FDA and payers for intrinsic capacity use. A successful TA1 will give us an easy-to-measure, accurate in-home PROSPR-IC score that predicts 20-year health outcomes and is responsive to lifestyle effects that are known to improve health. So here are the proposal requirements for TA1. Again, I just want to say these are all in the ISO, so please keep checking the ISO to make sure that you're following those guidelines. But just to reiterate a few key components. So I mentioned the first step is harmonizing existing data. Performers will be asked to analyze at least 3 of these data sets. Performers can use other data sets, but please justify your choices. For the IC test, we require measurement of all 5 intrinsic capacity components. Performers must also include DNA methylation, but we're not excluding that. Performers can propose other measures. Again, metabolomics, proteomics, or even a select panel of specific markers. Please justify your choices. We're also going to train models for male and female specific intrinsic capacity scores. And in these proposals, performers must ensure generalizability. In the second part, the building the kits. So we can imagine these kits connect to an app and to existing wearables. The performers must consider the cost during the 5-year program with the goal to get to $100. The performers must show feasibility for delivery of 1,000 kits in year 1 and 4,000 kits in year 3. Next, for the in-home study. Performers must plan for at least 1,000 participants at the study end, capturing ages from 35 to 75 years of age. And we expect strategies that will contain methods to improve retention in this in-home study. We will also allow extension of existing longitudinal data should performers have studies ongoing. In terms of the lifestyle intervention, again, we will use the continuation of the existing participants from the baseline study. The performers must propose to target multiple lifestyle interventions, and the performers must describe how participants' activity and behaviors will be scored and tracked over time. In terms of the prototype, commercialization plan must be described, and the performers must also have a plan to set up meetings with the FDA for designation of intrinsic capacity as a surrogate endpoint. Now, while commercialization is important, it is more important that we're collecting the correct data sets and that they are built for the PROSPR-IC score. So let's talk about the deliverables and the metrics. Again, these are in the ISO. In terms of the deliverables, we need a highly accurate and easy to measure intrinsic capacity score, and it must be responsive to interventions. It must have a deployable health management tool and demonstrate that IC measures are intervenable. And that deployment strategy must ensure regulatory approval. And that PROSPR in the end as an IC score is an FDA-validated surrogate endpoint. And here are the metrics for TA1. For accuracy, an increasing area under the curve, this increases progressively throughout the program. We need to show retention for the decentralized study of an attrition rate of less than 15%. So performers are going to have to innovate in this space. And for the in-home technology, we need to ensure data accuracy and consistency, and also metrics for coaching effectiveness. So the program is structured to have 2 tracks for TA1. Performers can apply for both or just one track. And the data between these if there are different performers, the data will be shared throughout. But there is a preference that this TA is tackled by one team. But if successful, surrogates of biomarker will be collected at baseline, an in-home measuring kit, and identification of intervenable measures based on lifestyle. So now let's talk about TA2, accelerating the creation of an aging therapeutic industry. So TA2 is going to tackle the problem that there are currently no surrogate endpoints and no regulatory path for therapeutics for age-associated decline in general health, and therefore there are no available treatments. So currently, there have not been any large-scale clinical trials that have been conducted with biological aging as an outcome. I would say there are promising preclinical data that suggests pleiotropic effects of some drugs that have been prescribed for other conditions. With PROSPR, we aim to develop first-generation therapeutics that directly extend health span. We think we'll generate consensus on decentralized trials for aging studies and demonstrate that PROSPR IC serves as a potential clinical endpoint for health span extension. For TA2, we will ask the performers, first of all, to develop a drug repurposing approach to validate PROSPR IC score as a surrogate endpoint and to identify the first-generation therapeutics that improve health span. There are 2 parts to this TA. The first is to access available clinical trial samples of disease groups. This is to identify intervenable surrogates from TA1, but in a diseased population, with drugs that we know impact chronic diseases. So on the top right are some examples, but again, performers are asked to use their insights of what should be tested. For example, they could include rapamycin, metformin, GLP-1s, acyclovir, naltrexone, anti-inflammatories. We're going to maintain that the sample should be of blood only, as these are samples that are more well-developed and consistent with the data collected in TA1. In terms of the trials, they should demonstrate improvements in multiple health aspects and multimorbidity, etc. And again, that should be at the performer's discretion. And teams can propose multiple drugs. In the second track, this is where we're going to perform an in-home decentralized trial in healthy folks. It's a phase 3 pivotal trial. For the recruitment, performers must describe repeated measures in a relatively healthy population, no extreme BMI or multiple chronic conditions in this population in approximately 60-year-olds. For the trial, performers must propose their own endpoints and trial design, but it must include PROSPR IC. Teams can propose multiple drugs, and single or combination therapies are allowed. If this is successful, we'll generate a data package for FDA review. And if the whole technical area is successful, this will provide the first generation therapeutics for health span and will help facilitate negotiations with the FDA for designation of PROSPR IC as a surrogate endpoint in the clinical trials by providing further evidence that is responsive to interventions that improve overall health, as well as health span metrics in diseased populations. And so here are the deliverables. Again, refer to the ISO for details. We need to demonstrate that the biomarkers are responsive through blood-based omics for track 1, and for track 2, a therapeutic that extends health span outcomes in a pivotal trial. And hopefully this can lead to establishing a regulatory pathway. The metrics are described on the right for biomarker performance, for intrinsic capacity and health outcomes, and the participant retention. For the tracks, the program is structured similar to TA1 to have 2 tracks. Performers can apply for both or for just one track. The data will be shared and there is a preference for one team. If successful, TA2 will demonstrate intervenable surrogates that are impacted by therapeutics in diseased and non-diseased people. So now let's talk about the final TA, technical area 3, And this is about the second generation interventions. And this is about putting the two other TAs together. If successful so far, we'll be armed with surrogates that can predict health, are intervenable by lifestyle, and therapeutics in both diseased people and non-diseased people. And so the question is, can we now bring that information together to develop second generation therapeutics from preclinical stage to human efficacy studies for health span extension in 3 years, based on the fact that we will have intrinsic capacity and surrogate biomarkers that will allow us to perform shorter duration clinical trials. And the goal of this technical area is to develop second generation therapeutics designed specifically to target biology of aging with the goal of extending health span by 20 years. So currently, there are no therapeutics available for health decline during aging, but there are mechanisms of aging biology beginning to be targeted in preclinical studies, and we think some of that preclinical data is exciting and promising. But longer trials are still necessary to test the efficacy of aging in humans. With PROSPR, we think we'll be able to test health span extension therapeutics clinically, and will provide evidence that PROSPR intra-IC-based surrogates are practical for short duration aging studies. This will provide options for health maintenance as people age. So here are the general guidelines for TA3. In the proposal, if possible, please provide evidence of human data for the mechanism of action of the therapeutic, explain anticipated drug interactions or long-term use data, and also plan for scalability and the transition from preclinical to clinical stage. During the program, performers will determine the efficacy of their therapeutic in preclinical models, being able to test intrinsic capacity in those preclinical models. If a model is not available, the opportunity will be granted to the performers to develop that as part of the program. We do have aggressive timelines. To test this hypothesis out of TA3, we want to get to in-human trials within 5 years. Therefore, interventions that require more than 18 months until IND-enabling studies will be excluded. And a trial at the end is going to be a short duration trial to determine if intrinsic capacity is a short-term predictor of health span. And the performers will propose the endpoints at their discretion, but again must include intrinsic capacity. This will be a decentralized or hybrid trial in 60 to 65-year-old participants without any overt disease or any chronic diseases. Here are the deliverables for TA3. One deliverable is the preclinical method to measure PROSPR IC in rodents, and also deliverable for efficacious medicines in a phase 1b clinical trial, demonstrating that therapeutics dramatically extends health span. For the metrics, preclinical data showing that PROSPR IC in a rodent correlates with human IC. In the preclinical study, we demonstrate that therapeutic maintains or improves over 5 of the health metrics in the preclinical IC during aging. It meets or exceeds IND-enabling criteria. And for the clinical trial, human data collection rate, efficacy on intrinsic capacity, and surrogates without adverse effects, with the goal of improving IC consistent with a 20-year improvement in health span. And finally, to the tracks for TA3, multiple teams will be selected, and through a series of data-driven milestones, teams will be reduced so that not all will progress to the human trial. And so I want to finish with the timeline and the interactions of these TAs. So in typical ARPA-H style program, we're running fast, with data being generated in parallel rather than in series. Therefore, successful execution requires motivated and capable teams that are going to share insights and data across the teams throughout the duration of the program. You can see here by these arrows how that data and information transfer occurs across different technical areas at different times. For example, data from technical area 1 in year 2 will be shared with technical area 2 to allow information about PROSPR IC metrics before those participants start that trial. We can also see how the data from the clinical studies and the blood samples of the interventions of therapeutics for TA2 will be shared with PROSPR IC in technical area 1. Later during the program of TA1, data will be go from TA1 down to help TA3 for the clinical trial there, and so on. So lots of opportunities for interaction and data sharing. And it's this integration that is going to be necessary to achieve the success of PROSPR. So teaming is critical. No one can do this job on their own. So please work together to put together the best proposals to accomplish these goals for the public. They're counting on you. So just as a reminder, what I've discussed today, I'll say it again. All of this information is explained in the final ISO, and that can be found here on the PROSPR website. If you've been looking at the draft ISO before today, please look at the final ISO. There have been changes which should be revised now. There you'll find deadlines for solution summaries and full proposals and deliverables and metrics for all the TAs. Please follow those instructions to the T. Now, after reading the ISO, if you have questions, please ask your questions here. Please write to us. Questions will be posted anonymously and our team will respond. And so that's it from me today about the program. So next, I'd like to introduce Tracy Newsom from the Business Innovation Division to talk about legal and contracting aspects of PROSPR.
Hi, I'm Tracy Newsom, and I am now acting as the Agreements Officer for the PROSPR program. My primary role as the Agreements Officer is to act as the business advisor for the program manager. And ultimately, I'll be working with Andrew and his team to negotiate and then sign the awards with legal guidance as appropriate. So today I'll be talking to you about some of the non-technical aspects of the Innovative Solutions Opening, or the ISO, which is the process that ARPA-H has created, the solicitation and selection process ARPA-H has created for their R&D efforts. So this slide of the highlights that I hope to go over, the non-technical highlights, I hope will be the areas that are most helpful for you as you prepare your solution summaries and full proposals. They are also born out of questions. We've received questions in these areas on previous solicitations. So hopefully by emphasizing them, we'll help eliminate some of those questions. The only item on this slide that I actually want to go into, because the other bullets all have their own slides, is the third bullet. We receive a lot of questions about whether we have a program ceiling or program budget, as well as individual estimates or budgets or ceilings for the awards under the program. So proactively, I just want to share with you that while programs are approved with budget estimates associated, so we do have a budget estimate for the program, but we will not be publicly releasing that, and that is in accordance with ARPA-H policy. Further, we have not established any ceilings or even a range of funding amounts for individual projects or awards. And that is because we make awards. We will negotiate the awards at dollar values that are commensurate with the individual characteristics of that project. So the individual statement of work, as well as the terms and conditions of the award. Okay, one of the first items to emphasize is that as a result of this ISO, we will only be awarding other transactions agreements. So I've included this slide for folks who are not as familiar with other transaction agreements. Maybe you've either never worked with the government or you've worked with us through other award types. So OTs, or other transactions, are by statute more defined by what they are not than what they are. So OTs are not procurement contracts, which are bound by the Federal Acquisition Regulation, as well as any associated or applicable supplements. So the DFARS, the NMCARs, or the HISAR, since we're part of HHS. They are also, the OT agreements are not bound by the Code of Federal Regulations because they are not financial assistance. So they're not grants or cooperative agreements, which are bound, since we're in HHS, would be bound by 2 CFR 200 or previously 45 CFR Part 75. Instead, the OT agreements are designed to reflect commercial contracting. So they're designed to be more streamlined and, most importantly, more flexible. Flexible in the processes that we can use to make selections, the submission and selection process, as well as our ability to tailor the terms and conditions of each award to align with the program or project goals and objectives and requirements, as well as the entity who's proposing and will ultimately be the awardee. So some examples that I think are most helpful to kind of illuminate why ARPA-H thus far in R&D has awarded a majority of OTs and expects that to continue is that if we were using procurement contracts with the dollar values typical of our awards, we would be required to request certified cost and pricing data, which is kind of an open kimono approach to the financial data of that entity. On the other end, if we were issuing financial assistance, we would be prohibited from allowing profit on the awards, except in limited cases. So I've given both of those are financial examples that show how prescriptive the FAR and then the CFRs are related to the process and the ultimate awards. With OTs, we have an inherent responsibility, as we do with any award vehicle, to make awards at reasonable prices. So I'm not suggesting anything different, but with OTs, we are allowed to be more creative and use critical thought to only request the information we need. So we don't need to request certified costs and pricing data. And if we think profit is reasonable, we can award that on contracts. So it allows us to meet entities where they are, to hopefully attract some of the more non-traditional entities to submit their really amazing science and technical solutions. Most of you are likely aware the new administration is taking the time it needs to get integrated with HHS and thus ARPA-H. But once that happens, we expect the communications pause to be lifted. Concurrent with that, we are currently finishing some revisions to the ISO and finishing the review and approval process. So once the final ISO is approved, and also once the communications pause is lifted, we will be posting the final ISO. One of the attachments that will be posted with that is a model OT for PROSPR, a PROSPR model OT. And what that means is that we are posting what we think is the framework or the skeleton of the awards that might result under the PROSPR program. So this would be the starting point for our negotiations with the proposers who had successful proposers. So once that's posted, I invite you to look at that. You'll actually be required to submit any red lines that you're proposing with your full proposal. But even before that, please look at the model OT and submit any questions you might have about it. As soon as the communications pause is lifted, we will also be resuming posting answers to those questions. Finally, and immediately, you can actually look at sample OTs that we have. ARPA-H has created the OTC, or other transaction community. And if you follow the map at the bottom of the slide, you can go and there's resources on that page. And one of the resources is a sample OT. So please check that out immediately so that you can look at some of the typical terms and conditions that you might encounter if you're successful in negotiating an award under PROSPR. Eligibility information. This will be in section 3.0 of the final ISO. But I know that in the draft right now that's posted, it's in section 6. It's notable that in the final ISO, although we have restructured it to hopefully make it more reader-friendly, the information in this section is not changing. And what I'm about to go over is very explicitly in the ISO, but we received so many questions about eligibility. I want to go over a little bit more in depth some of these, even though still at a high level. So first, if you are considering partnering with a federally funded research and development center, please check out the information in the ISO, which again is not changing from the draft to the final. This is based on ARPA-H policy and is a general prohibition on ARPA-H funding FFRDCs as part of proposer or performer teams. So please look at this, because if you submit an FFRDC as part of your proposal, we would not likely be able to make that award. And we would definitely not be able to consider you as an eligible performer team if you have not followed the process that is outlined in the ISO in this section. Next, and very, very important, SAM registration. So in the system for award management, you can go in to check if you have an active registration. You must not only have a registration, but it must be active. And an active registration is required for all prime awardees or performers. The reason this is so important to address right away is that SAM, or the System for Award Management, who handles these registrations, is entirely independent of ARPA-H. And what that means is we have no influence over the timeline that it takes to, one, for them to create the new registration, and or two, to reactivate an inactive registration. So please go in and verify. So a couple nuances related to this, because again, we receive a lot of questions. So one, principal investigators are not considered entities who can receive award. We receive a lot of questions about how many awards a PI can have. So this is just clarification that in pretty much all ARPA-H awards, or in all ARPA-H awards, principal investigators will be the equivalent of personnel. They may formally be key personnel, or they may just be personnel within an entity. For the PROSPR program, the principal investigator will be a formal key personnel that from your proposal will be incorporated into award. So they are not an entity or proposer because they cannot receive a SAM registration. So they would not be receiving an award directly from the government. Second, this registration is not required for all team members. So it's only the submitting entity. So this could be if you have a traditional prime and sub relationship on your performer team, it's only the prime. And if you're doing a less traditional approach of kind of a multi-party, teaming agreement, and you have a multi-party group, it's only the submitting entity who's submitting the proposal and then will ultimately sign the award and receive the invoice payments. That is the only entity who actually needs to have this registration. One final note on this that's related is that under the PROSPR solicitation, prime proposers can only submit one solution. So entities can submit multiple or can be part of multiple solution proposals, but they can only be part of one as the prime. And so this relates to some of those questions about PIs and how many times they can propose. So as part of an entity, PIs can propose as part of multiple solutions, but only once as part of the prime team. Okay. Last, non-US entities, because we also receive a lot of questions about this. This is fairly clearly outlined in the ISO, but there's two key parts of information that inform this in the ISO. So first, by statute, ARPA-H must give priority to entities who are proposing to conduct work on US soil. So notably, it's not that we must give preference to awards for domestic entities, just entities who are going to be conducting the effort or the work on US soil. We can make awards to non-domestic entities, both at the prime and at a sub level. The only exception to that is covered foreign countries. And there are references in the ISO that you can go to for more information. But had you considered having as part of your team an entity that has been established in one of those 4 covered countries, please reconsider, because we cannot allow ARPA-H funding to go towards any of those entities at any level of your proposal. Okay, now we'll jump into the submission and selection process in general. So in the final ISO, this will be in sections 4 and 5. And as you'll notice, I think my specific bullet on the agenda slide is the first bullet on this slide, that solution summaries are mandatory. So this is another really important thing I want to foot stomp. If you hope to be part of the PROSPR program eventually as a performer, you must submit a solution summary. Otherwise, you will not be eligible to submit a full proposal. To guide you when you submit a solution summary, you will be looking at Appendix B in the final ISO. So I know currently in the draft, it is Appendix C, and it will be it's going to be pretty much the same information. We are just eliminating the eligibility and conformance sheet that is currently Appendix B. So that is going away. If you had questions on that, you don't need to worry about that. That is being eliminated. So now the guidance related to your solution summary package will be in Appendix B. And again, you'll notice, the same maximum 5 pages, which excludes the cover page, the abstract page, the references, and your rough order magnitude, which is basically your high-level budget information. All of this, your entire package, will be submitted into the ARPA-H solution submission system. So please, this is another thing that you should be looking at in advance, because you will need to register. So please go in early to register in the system to make sure that you're not having to deal with that right before the due date. All timely solution summary submissions will be reviewed, and all entities, all eligible entities who submitted a timely solution summary will receive feedback that at a minimum will consist of whether we're encouraging or discouraging you to submit a full proposal. What that means is that, obviously, if we're encouraging a full proposal, it means we think, we're encouraging you to spend the time and effort to do that. By discouraging you, it reflects our respect for the time and resources we know all entities have limited resources, and we know that it takes a significant amount of time and effort to prepare full proposals. So by discouraging you, we're giving you a data point that's, to indicate we think it is unlikely that we will fund your solution. So we're just a data point for you to consider when you think about your resources and the time and effort it takes to submit a full proposal. However, regardless of whether we've encouraged or discouraged you, you can submit a full proposal. All eligible entities who submitted a timely solution summary are able to submit a full proposal. And in the full proposal, you will be looking at Appendix C for guidance on what is required in your full proposal. You'll also see in the final ISO that we've tried to consolidate full proposal information to make it, again, more reader-friendly to help you as you're preparing your full proposal. You're still going to be submitting the technical and management volume, the cost volume, the national and policy volume, as well as the model OT, if you have any red lines to that, any suggestions or terms and conditions you think you might take exception to. When you have your whole package, you will submit that into the ARPA-H solution submission system again. I added a little asterisk only because the only exception to submissions in the system is that if you have a team member, a sub, whether it's traditional prime sub or just another team member who does not want to share their information in the budget spreadsheet that you will see in the final ISO, that's the second attachment. If they don't want to share that information with you as the prime proposer or submitter, they are allowed to email that to PROSPR@arpah.gov. And this is clearly outlined in the ISO. But this is the only exception to submitting within the system. And if your team doesn't have any issue with you as the submitter seeing their information, there's no reason to do this. You should submit everything in that system instead of piecemealing your proposal. But it is an option. So once we've received your full proposal, the government at the full proposal stage will be doing a conformance screening. So we will be looking not only at whether you've complied with the more administrative, more logistical type aspects of including all of the required submission, but we will also be looking at conformance to the program requirements. And this can occur, we're doing this initial screening, but we can actually remove a proposal from consideration at any stage if it becomes clear that the solution submitted does not conform to the program. And so I think this is really important because we recognize it's another reflection of respecting your time and effort in the amazing science and technology that we know you're all doing. In some cases, we have found that out of passion and because your solution is so awesome, you might submit it to a program solicitation where it does not fit within the program requirements. So that would be a case where we would remove it as non-conforming, but we might suggest that you consider one of our open office solicitations. Those are more open and you can just submit your amazing ideas. The program solicitations are slightly different. As you've read the program information in the solicitation, you see all the different metrics and all the different requirements. So solutions are expected to conform to those and to demonstrate they can conform in their proposals. After the conformance screening is done, the proposals will be formally evaluated against the evaluation criteria, 1 to 3. Once the entire scientific review process is done, which never at any stage includes comparing your proposals against other proposals. In the entire process, your proposals is only evaluated against the criteria. It's not just the initial evaluation. We never rack and stack proposals at ARPA-H, and is always that independent assessment against the criteria. And once that entire process is done, we will be notifying all of the eligible entities who submitted full proposals and letting them know whether they've been selected to negotiate further to receive funding through an award or if they have not. Okay, this slide on evaluation criteria for full proposals, I did not copy and paste because the full write-up for each criteria is very clearly in the ISO, but I wanted to note a few things that I think are important for you to consider as you're preparing your proposals. First, please read them. The largest part of the substance of our criteria is often similar between ISOs for our R&D efforts. There are changes in each one because the evaluation criteria are often tailored based on the specific program requirements. So please read them. That's first. Second, they are listed in descending order of importance, which I believe is always consistent in our ARPA-H R&D ISOs, that they're in descending order of importance and the overall scientific and technical merit is most important. So what this tells you is that we are trying to very clearly convey to you that the scientific and technical merit of your solution is way more important than your budget. And again, that doesn't mean budget is not important because we have that inherent responsibility to make awards at reasonable prices. But what it means is that we are trying to tell you that we are looking for the best and most revolutionary ideas, and we are expecting commensurate budget proposals. We're looking for realistic budgets that align with that amazing revolutionary science. If you're selected as one of the most advantageous proposals, we can negotiate, we will be negotiating the award ultimately. But when you submit your proposal, please submit a realistic budget based on the statement of work you're proposing and the technical approach for it. Okay, this is my final slide, and I wanted to emphasize that, as I said before, as soon as, and hopefully it occurs on the same day or that we're ready to post, but as soon as the communication pause is able to be lifted and our final ISO is approved, we will be posting the final ISO, and that will be the final ISO itself, and we will have two attachments, the model OT and an Excel spreadsheet to support submission of those budgets by the prime and all the subs. Nothing I've discussed today or that anyone is discussing should be construed as conflicting with that final ISO. And what I mean by that is if you think something any of us have said is in conflict with that final ISO, please submit a question because the final ISO supersedes the draft, and it also supersedes anything you hear verbally, unless or until that ISO is amended in writing. We will always post amendments or other guidance related to this program. We'll post it on sam.gov, and hopefully you're also following the PROSPR program page on the ARPA-H website because the links on the PROSPR program page are continually updated as or if we post anything on sam.gov. If you have any questions, as I said, as soon as we're able to, we're going to resume answering them. So you are welcome to keep submitting them, or I might advise that you wait to see the final ISO to see what's in there and then submit your questions. We also have already posted a number of answers to frequently asked questions, so you are invited to also go there to see if your question has already been answered. The final two, please check your SAM registration because, again, this is a requirement that we cannot waive, and we also have no influence as to how long it takes for your registration to be created and or made active. Finally, please read the ISO, and by that, I mean the final ISO, because we've tried to restructure it, make it as helpful as possible, because our goal is to help you prepare and submit your solution summaries and then ultimately your full proposals. So thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. My name is Craig Gravitz. I am the director of one of our 5 mission offices, the Project Accelerator Transition Innovation Office, aka PATIO, which is really just a fun way of saying that I run ARPA-H's dedicated commercialization function. So on PATIO, our mission is to increase the probability that ARPA-H funded health technologies will reach Americans by identifying the barriers and providing transition and commercialization services to both program managers and performers. Key here is that since our agency doesn't fund performers in perpetuity, my office's capabilities increase the odds that solutions that we fund will attract private investment and customers. Essentially, we seek to translate the breakthroughs that the program managers develop in their programs. So these are the areas that I have created inside my office. One is to incorporate private sector insights into program design and execution. So before this Proposers Day, we worked with the program managers to help design small parts of the concept, the parts that relate to transition. Subsequently, we like to empower performers to transition their solutions. We accelerate the better health outcomes by using our services to facilitate the small business program, which we run outside of PATIO. And we also address innovator barriers to the market through certain transition related projects. You may have seen the Sprint for Women's Health that was run through my office. So I want to describe the key functions that we provide. One is transition mentorship. So for all of the PMs, we have created a really wonderful program where we bring in private sector industry experts. So think people who have been successful entrepreneurs, people who maybe sit on boards, and they will, give advice to program managers who are working in an adjacent area. Something where we make sure we have that private sector lens for the program during program design and then throughout performance. We also conduct market analyses at this time to make sure that there's no duplication with the private sector, and also really to identify opportunities in the private sector. Secondly, with our Entrepreneurs in Residence program, what we do here is as the program performers mature, we assign fractional executives to help with very unique and specific aspects of the business as it achieves maturity. So far, we have piloted this with the small business program that we run, and it's been really successful helping some of our SBIRS TTR performers approach really important transition milestones like moving towards IND. We have another function where we help with market insights. This is a strategic analysis that identify trends in a particular area. So this will happen both before program design to help the program managers really think about what the market is doing, but then also throughout, this helps the program manager really sort of keep abreast with current trends. And finally, we work with program managers, programs, and performer teams on regulatory and reimbursement issues. We know that aside from the science, the regulatory pathways and the reimbursement models are some of the key factors that performers will need to survive in the wild. Another capability that we manage inside PATIO is a function called ARPA-H. ARPA-H is a nationwide innovation network where we have more than 1,000 members, which we like to call spokes. These are groups that represent different parts of the health innovation system. And in this network, we have two hubs. One is our Investor Catalyst Hub and Network. This is located in Cambridge, Massachusetts. This is focused on navigating the complexities of the market landscape. And secondly, we have a hub in Dallas, Texas, which is our customer experience hub, which is really focused on engaging patients, providers, and other stakeholders to make sure that we're really solving for all of America. We also have the stakeholder and operations hub, not necessarily part of ARPA-H, but these are the three locations that, if you want to think of ARPA-H's headquarters or hubs, this is where really each of our key nerve centers are. And then for both the Investor Catalyst and Customer Experience Network, there's other spokes all across the country. So just to give you an idea of who is in ARPA-H, which is our platform for transition-focused R&D, I won't read them all, but you can see the different types of entities that are part of this network. Okay, and so what does ARPA-H do? How does it help the agency and other performers? So one, it has rapid convening power. So we can bring together the right people to respond to needs, and we can generate insights and inform programs. Secondly, as I mentioned earlier, efforts like the Sprint for Women's Health were run out of my office. It's a streamlined funding approach. While this particular effort is not run through the network, there may be other opportunities that you can compete for. So I encourage you to keep an eye on ARPA-H. So we have a transition focus inside ARPA-H. There might be very specific transition focused projects, and also it has reach. There are many experts and other entities that we can pull on as part of this network. What are the core capabilities of both networks? One is a network survey. If you look on our website right now, you'll see that we're doing some work on reimbursement. As I mentioned, that's one of our focus areas inside PATIO. We also do our R&D opportunities. And finally, we have network events. These are ways that both the spokes and other innovators across the health ecosystem can learn about different topics, meet other innovators in the health space, and really encourage you to keep an eye on that so you can be part of the broader ARPA-H community. And finally, really encourage your organization to join both of our hubs. You can see that there are QR codes for both of them. It's a really simple process. It doesn't cost anything to be part of this network. And really what being a spoke will allow you to do is participate in all of those other efforts that I mentioned above, and also give you access to opportunities, funding opportunities that we have through the network. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today. Hopefully you're as excited about PROSPR as we are, and we look forward to reading your proposals, and we can all work together to develop next generation therapeutics that can extend health span.